At 0226 hours local time, 6 Ukrainian FPV drones lifted off from a tree line in occupied Zaporizhzhia Oblast and turned east. Their combined price tag, airframes, warheads, fiber-optic spools and all, came to roughly $11,000. The target, sitting 28 kilometers away, was a Russian field ammunition depot, a cluster of earth-bermed storage points packed with artillery shells, mortar rounds, and guided munitions staged for the next morning's fire missions. The depot's inventory, by conservative estimate, was worth somewhere north of $45 million. That's a ratio that should make any accountant physically uncomfortable. But the real punchline wasn't coming from the drones. It was coming from the ammunition itself. In about 14 minutes, 6 small-shaped charges were going to open 6 small holes, and the depot's own cargo was going to spend the next 9 hours tearing itself apart without any further help from Ukraine at all. The operators didn't know that yet. What they knew was simpler and more immediate. They had 6 shots, a fiber-optic connection that couldn't be jammed, a window between patrol rotations that intelligence said was about 22 minutes wide, and a depot protected by a crew that had spent the last month shooting down drones exactly like theirs. Here's the part nobody talks about when they show you the explosion footage. Getting to that depot was the hard part. The explosion was the easy part. The ammunition handled that on its own. The first problem showed up 3 minutes into the flight, and it wasn't Russian. It was wind. A low-pressure system had dragged a 30-kilometer-per-hour crosswind across the approach corridor, and at the altitude these drones fly, somewhere between treetop and please don't sneeze, that crosswind wasn't a nuisance. It was a fuel tax. Every meter of lateral correction the operator made to hold his heading cost battery he'd budgeted for the return leg of a one-way trip. There was no return leg, but there was a margin, and the wind was eating it. The fiber-optic link held perfectly, because fiber doesn't care about wind, rain, or what the Russian electronic warfare truck parked near the depot thought about any of it. That truck, a mobile jamming platform covering the depot's western approach, was pumping noise across the 2.4 and 5.8 GHz bands hard enough to brick every commercial drone receiver within 15 kilometers. It had been doing that for weeks, and it had been working. The depot's war diary probably had a tidy column of downed Ukrainian drones, each one a radio-controlled aircraft that flew into the jamming bubble and simply stopped answering its operator. These 6 weren't answering their operators over radio either. They were answering over glass. A hair-thin fiber-optic cable spooling out behind each airframe, carrying full video downstream and control commands upstream at the speed of light, with 0 electromagnetic signature for the jamming truck to even detect, let alone disrupt. You can jam the air, you can't jam a wire. The Russian EW operator, for his part, was having a quiet night. His equipment was doing exactly what it was supposed to do. His screen showed a clean bubble of denied airspace around the depot. If anyone had asked him whether Ukrainian drones could reach the storage berms tonight, he would have said no with total confidence, and he would have been wrong, and the equipment would have agreed with him right up until the first explosion. At 0234 hours, the lead drone crossed the outer security perimeter at an altitude of roughly 40 feet, low enough that the depot's single air surveillance radar, a short-range system mounted on a mast near the command dugout, couldn't separate it from the ground return. This is the same physics problem every ground radar has with very low targets. The beam hits the drone and the Earth at the same time, and the return looks like one object, the planet. Against a cruise missile at 300 feet, the radar works fine. Against a quadcopter the size of a pizza box at treetop height, it's trying to find a freckle on a basketball. But the depot wasn't relying only on radar. A sentry on the southern berm heard the first drone before he saw it. Not a helicopter sound, not a jet sound, that thin, high whine of small electric motors under load, the sound this war has taught every soldier on both sides to dread. He shouted the alarm and opened fire with his rifle. Here's the thing about shooting at a small drone in the dark with an assault rifle. It's a genuinely brave response and a genuinely hopeless one. The target is small, fast, maneuvering in 3 dimensions, and the shooter has iron sights, darkness, and adrenaline. The probability math is ugly. But the shooting wasn't pointless in one respect. It told every other soldier on the perimeter exactly where to look, and it forced the lead drone's operator to jink. A hard lateral correction that burned through the last of his crosswind margin and committed him to a straight-line run at the nearest berm. The operator took the line, not because it was a good option, but because it was the only option left. The shaped charge in the nose was a modified PG-7 derivative, roughly 2.5 kilograms of copper-lined explosive designed to focus its energy into a narrow jet of molten metal. Against a tank's frontal armor, it's a serious weapon. Against the sheet metal cover of an earth-bermed ammunition storage point, it's obscene overkill. A fire axe used to open a letter. The jet punched through the cover and detonated against the first stack of 152mm artillery shells inside. And that was the last thing Ukraine had to do. What happened next was chemistry, not tactics. A 152mm high-explosive shell contains roughly 6 kilograms of TNT. A standard storage pallet holds dozens of them. One bermed storage point at a depot this size holds many pallets. The shaped charge jet didn't need to detonate them all. It needed to start a fire. The fire did the rest. The first cook-off came 40 seconds after impact. One shell, its propellant charge heated past its ignition threshold, detonated inside the berm. The pressure cracked the earth cover, venting superheated gas and fragments into the open air. The next cook-off came 8 seconds later. Then another. Then the interval stopped being countable, because the fire had reached a second pallet and the detonations began overlapping. On the operator's screens 28 kilometers away, the video feed from drones 2 through 6 showed something none of them had trained for. Their target was now exploding on its own, continuously, and the airspace they needed to fly through to reach the remaining storage points had just become the most dangerous place within 50 kilometers. This is the part nobody warns you about in the briefing. Success at an ammunition depot doesn't make the mission easier. It makes it harder, because the target starts fighting you with its own inventory. The second drone's operator watched a 152mm shell detonate mid-cook-off and throw a chunk of casing across his approach path. He jinked low and felt the airframe shudder through a pressure wave that wasn't there 2 seconds ago. His fiber-optic cable, spooling out behind the drone, caught a thermal updraft and added drag he hadn't planned for. His video feed, still crystal clear, still unjammable, showed him a storage area that was now half rubble and half inferno, with shell fragments arcing through the air on trajectories that had nothing to do with anyone's plan. He lined up on the second berm and dove. The shaped charge punched through. The fire started. The cook-offs began. He never saw the result because his camera feed ended at the moment of impact. But 28 kilometers away, the thermal signature on the reconnaissance drone's screen doubled in size in under a minute. Drones 3 and 4 came in together, 15 seconds apart, targeting berms on the depot's eastern side. The third made it clean. Its warhead opened a storage point full of mortar rounds, and the secondary detonation started almost immediately. Smaller, faster pops than the artillery shells, a staccato drum roll of 82mm charges cooking off in their crates. The fourth drone didn't make it clean. A fragment from a cook-off, not aimed, not guided, just a hot chunk of steel tumbling through the air on a random ballistic arc, clipped its rear motor arm at an altitude of 60 feet. The drone spun once. The operator fought for control and almost caught it, and then the fiber-optic cable snagged taut against a fence post and ripped free. The video went black. The drone hit the ground somewhere inside the depot perimeter, its warhead detonating on impact against open dirt instead of a storage point. 5 out of 6 drones still on mission. 1 wasted on bad luck and a fence post. The fifth operator was flying through a landscape that now looked nothing like the satellite photos loaded into his planning folder. Half the depot was on fire. Columns of smoke and debris climbed into the night sky, lit from below by continuous detonations. The wind patterns had changed completely. Thermal updrafts off the burning berms created their own weather, pulling cool air in from the fields around the depot and shoving hot air straight up. His approach corridor, which had been calculated in still air, now included a crosswind that hadn't existed 10 minutes ago and was being generated by his own team's success. He flew through it anyway, took his shot at a berm on the northern edge that the fire hadn't reached yet, and the shaped charge opened it like everyone before it. The cook-off started in under a minute. The sixth and final drone had the simplest job and the hardest conditions. Its target was the depot's vehicle park, the trucks and loaders used to move ammunition from the storage berms to the guns at the front. No secondary explosions to hope for, just steel and diesel and tires. But by now the airspace over the depot was a churning mess of smoke, heat shimmer, random shell fragments, and pressure waves from cook-offs that were still accelerating. The operator could barely see the vehicle parked through the thermal camera. He couldn't see it at all through the optical one. He flew on thermal alone, found the silhouette of a loaded ammunition truck, and dove. The warhead detonated against the truck's cargo bed. Crated shells spilled onto the ground, and the diesel tank underneath caught fire. A secondary explosion followed 90 seconds later when the spilled cargo heated past its threshold. By 02:40 hours, 14 minutes after the first drone crossed the perimeter, the Ukrainian operator's job was done. 6 drones launched, 5 warheads on target, 1 lost to a fragment and a fence post. And for the next 9 hours, the depot did the rest. The cook-offs didn't stop at dawn. They accelerated. As fire spread from berm to berm through cracked earth covers and shared drainage channels, new stocks reached ignition temperature and joined the chain. Each detonation threw fragments that started new fires in berms the drones had never touched. The depot's own layout, designed to separate stocks for safety, held up for a while and then didn't, because the fires were patient and the concrete was not. Russian firefighting crews arrived within the first hour and were forced back almost immediately. You don't fight a fire when the fire is shooting back. Every few minutes another shell cooked off, throwing fragments hundreds of meters in random directions. The depot became an exclusion zone, a place nobody could enter and nobody could help, burning on a timetable set entirely by physics and chemistry. By midday, satellite imagery showed a blackened scar across the depot footprint, still smoking, still popping with intermittent detonations. The storage berms were collapsed. The vehicle park was burned out. The command dugout had been evacuated hours earlier. Now do the math, because the math is where this story actually lives. 6 drones at roughly $1,800 each. Call the total strike package, including the reconnaissance bird and the fiber-optic spools, somewhere around $11,000, generously. The ammunition destroyed. Artillery shells, mortar rounds, guided munitions, propellant charges, crated small arms ammunition, and the vehicles used to move it all, runs into the tens of millions of dollars at replacement cost. That's before you count the weeks of reduced fire missions along the sector while the logistics chain scrambles to replenish stocks from a depot that no longer exists. This is the exchange rate that defines the drone war, and it gets worse for the defender every month. The drones get cheaper. The ammunition doesn't. The fiber optic links get harder to counter. The jamming trucks keep jamming in empty frequency. And the cook-offs, the part of the attack that does 95% of the actual damage, cost the attacker nothing at all. They're free. They're powered by the defender's own inventory. Second, this strike didn't require a single piece of advanced technology that doesn't already exist on the commercial market. Modified hobby-grade airframes. Shape charges adapted from a warhead design that's been in production since the 1960s. Fiber optic cable you can buy by the kilometer. The most sophisticated element of the whole package is the human at the other end of the wire, and Ukraine has been training those humans for 3 years now. This isn't a capability that can be sanctioned, embargoed, or outproduced. It's a recipe, and everyone has the ingredients. Third, and this is the number Moscow doesn't want to see on any spreadsheet, the defense worked. The jamming truck was operational. The radar was active. The sentry raised the alarm. 1 drone was physically knocked out of the air. And none of it mattered, because the 4 drones that got through to the ammunition started a chain reaction that the defenders couldn't stop, couldn't fight, and couldn't enter for 9 hours. Destruction is blowing up an ammunition crate. Paralysis is starting a fire that makes the ammunition blow itself up, for free. That's not a strike. That's a hostile takeover of the depot's own inventory. And the return on investment would make a venture capitalist blush. If the math behind this war interests you as much as the footage, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so the next breakdown finds you. And tell me in the comments, what do you think is the more dangerous target for Ukraine to keep hitting? Fuel trains that starve the tanks, or ammunition depots that silence the guns? The answer tells you which war Ukraine thinks it's fighting. See you in the next one.